and welcome to 19 O'Clock News, a Kodocha podcast. My name is Mahou Shoujo M. I am joined by my co-host, That Kodocha Girl, and today we are joined by a very special guest. Give a warm 19 O'Clock News welcome to Fridgefeet.
Woohoo!
Thank you guys for having me.
And today we are going to talk about episode 18, Hungry Pair Play Hide and Seek. And I think, what was the chapter number? 11? No.
I think it's 16.
16. I was counting by how there are 5 chapters in a volume, and I knew it was the first chapter of volume 4.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's kind
Chapter
of confusing since that it only covers chapter 16, and there's obviously a lot of episodes that cover like 2 chapters or something.
That, and this episode cuts off almost at the end of the chapter, but not quite. I feel like this is a more 1-to-1 ratio than we typically get with the chapter to episode.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I don't think we've had an episode slash chapter that was like this ever.
I'm looking at my notes because I'm actually making a list right now. Hopefully by the time that this episode will actually be up, it'll be like available, but I'm making a little like episode guide to Kodocha where it has like what chapter aligns with what episode and whatnot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be up soon. I keep like polishing it and polishing it. I want it to be the best it can be, but
I love
so
that.
excited for that resource. Oh
Me
my
too.
God.
Me
thank
too.
you, girl. But yeah, the first episode that starts doing it where it's like a chapter an episode is episode 12, which that's this time Sana's the Lone Wolf, which is just chapter 10. And that goes until episode 19, which is then chapter 17. So it's one chapter an episode for those episodes. So most of my daughter and I arc.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I do feel like I don't want to say tickles me because that sounds mean, but I do feel bad when people come to like the server and they're like, the anime ended really abruptly. Like, where do I pick up in the manga? And I'm like, oh, you don't? Sorry.
Yeah, no.
You just kind of pick up the whole thing, really.
No, genuinely. It's funny too, because it's like I get that inclination because I remember having that when I was earlier, first getting into like anime and manga and everything. But I feel like the first time that you end up reading a manga or anime that does like diverge a lot, you're then like, oh, I guess I do just start from the start.
Yeah. And because boy, do they.
Yeah. Especially shoujo.
Especially shoujo from the 90s where there were just a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
But in any case, we wanted to ask, since it's your first time on the podcast and we are trying to remember to ask all of our guests this when they first come, but how did you find Kodocha? What is your Kodocha story?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out yesterday how I could condense it a little because it's actually a little bit of a long story. But essentially, I was obviously introduced to anime when I was like little with like Pokemon and whatever, which I feel like it does count, it doesn't count, But then when I really got interested in anime, I was just watching it in like 3 parts on YouTube, like how that used to exist.
Yep.
But my local library had a really big anime collection like on DVD. So I wanted to start tapping into that, but I also was aware of the fact that there's a lot of so actually let me back up a second. The only DVD player in my house at the time, I was like 12. The only DVD player in our house was in my mom's room, which meant that she could like come in at any time,
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want to watch anything that was like embarrassing or had fan service in it.
Fair.
If I got it from the library. So at the library, I looked for anime specifically that said something like all age appropriate because I figured that wouldn't have anything embarrassing in it. And I ended up finding that Kodocha, they had the complete Kodocha collection at my library. And it said on the back that it was rated PG. So I was like, okay, this is the one. And I obviously got really into it.
I love that story. That's really cool. It's cool that your library had all of them, all the DVDs.
I'm really glad that it did because obviously it brought me so much joy finding the series to this day, obviously. Unfortunately, my library doesn't have it anymore. I found out later on that libraries you need to have things checked out a certain number of times a year in order for them to keep it in circulation. And I
Mhm.
guess Kodocha at the time was not getting very many, takeouts, which is sad. If I knew, I probably would have been, taking it out of the library every few times a year or whatever, just to keep it in circulation, even though I have the DVDs.
Yeah, that's really
But
disappointing. I do wonder where they are now. Like, if did they?
yeah, I think they just like do it at like a used book sale or something. So I'm sure that it went to like a happy home.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I was about to say.
yeah, no, my library does those a lot. So I'm sure that that's what happened to it. But yeah, I'm really happy that I was able to get into the series that way. And obviously, it was very exciting to like, keep watching the show and then I'd get to a cliffhanger and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to go to the library tomorrow to get another DVD, you know? Um,
Mhm.
So I remember like coming home at one point with, like half the series because I just got so invested and I wanted to watch all of it. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, I got super into it and definitely helped that I was like I literally was 12 when I watched it and obviously Sana is 11 at the beginning of the series, but she turns 12, so I was like, wow, just like me for real.
I love
So
that. I
yeah.
do think that there's something really special about finding Kodocha at that time in your life. I was also around that age, and I don't know, just hits different.
Yeah, no, it does. I feel like Kodocha is one of those series where you can like get into it at any age just because of how resonant the plot lines are and the characters are. But
Mm.
I don't know, I do think that there was some level of like, oh my gosh, these characters could be my friends.
No, I
Yeah.
totally get that because I actually while I was watching the episode today to get ready for our podcast, I was thinking, like I usually watch this and I relate to Sana the most, but like I've noticed I've been relating more to Misako, and I love that for me because like it just kind of adds another dimension to my love for the series.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Oh, for real. I think about that a lot. Like how, obviously Sana and Akito are still very important to me, but of course now, like as I've gotten older, being able to identify with the adult characters more like Misako, like Rei, and kind of try to see things from their perspective has been really interesting.
It's really funny too, realizing because obviously the impression you're supposed to get with Ray is that he's young.
Hmm.
Um, but like I didn't get that obviously being like a 12-year-old, it's still like that is an adult man. Um, but when I watch it now, I'm like, oh yeah, especially in the Japanese version, he has like a baby voice.
It does, yeah. I think he's supposed to be like what, 21, 22. Like,
Yeah, he's
The manga
gosh.
21.
says, yeah, the manga says that he was supposed to be 20 at the start, which is kind of confusing though, because that if you do the timeline, then that would mean that I
Oh,
think he was like 17 when Sana found him on the street.
Hmm.
yeah. I think that might be some bad Obana math. Because you come of age and are an adult at 20 in Japan.
Yeah.
But you graduate high school at 18 and his parents died shortly after that. So maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I don't know.
Yeah, that seems more right.
In any case, I think the next part of that question was going to be, why has, it stayed so special to you all these years?
I love the characters, obviously. Like all the characters are just so well observed and I relate to a lot of them, just because of how I know that in one of the author's notes, Obana mentions that she like relates to Akito and Sana and a lot of the characters, and that really shows through because I think, obviously when a writer puts themselves into a character, I mean, how else can you write a character? Just additionally, like I feel like you can feel that. So the characters are so lovable and resonant. And I like the structure because I feel like Kodocha and a lot of other shoujos do this, where it has that structure where it's like, okay, you introduce a conflict that's like interesting and you sit with that conflict for a while and then as it starts to resolve, then a new conflict comes in. Um,
Hmm.
and I really like the way that Kodocha does it. It always feels like it's ramping to something more exciting, even though that every single thing is exciting, you know?
Mhm.
Um, there's just something about it. It's so fun. I love this series. I also just love the like 90s-ness of it all. Um,
Hmm.
it's so like the art style is beautiful, the animation, like even though that, it has the 90s energy, both good and bad, it's so charming to me.
Yeah, it's super nostalgic.
Exactly.
Hmm. I love that part too. I've said this before on the podcast even, but like I really do believe that like 90s technology is like a character of Kodocha.
Oh no,
Um,
you're so right.
like the fact that they're not able to communicate super immediately. I mean, I even wrote it down for my notes for this episode. I was like, an answering machine. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I want to be like kids these days, but like it's a product of another time. Really
Yeah.
emphasizes the vintage nature of the show.
No, it really does. It feels like you're so right in saying that it's like a character itself, because it's like there is just so much 90s energy within it.
Absolutely. I mean, like just the fact that like payphones are how they communicate when like things are happening. That's true of the manga, it's true in the anime.
Hmm.
Or, them sending faxes to each other, when Akito moves at the end of the manga and
Yeah,
like all of those communication like issues and challenges are just things that we've really overcome. I think
absolutely.
as a global society in the last 20 years. So I feel like some of us can barely relate to or remember what it was like, but things moved a lot slower.
They did.
And then things moved too fast.
True.
That they did. That they did.
We wanted to know how did the Kodocha Wiki come to be?
Yeah, so I did some research on this because I wanted to mention I'm a pretty recent like addition to the Kodocha Wiki. I started working on it just last summer actually because I feel like I don't know if you guys do this, but I've worked on wikis before and I know that you guys have said that you haven't, which is perfectly fine, obviously. But a lot of the time when I use wikis just as like a user, I'm just thinking like this is done. This is perfect. It has everything, you know? And if I'll notice like something that's not on there, I'll just be like, well, they'll add it on eventually. But somehow, I realized just this last summer that I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually a lot that's not on here. I think just because I was like rewatching the series, rereading the manga, because of Discotheque's release of the second season. So I was like, oh my gosh, actually, yeah, there is a lot that's not on here. I should try and help. And then they were like, well, you can become an admin, which is cool. But yeah, I looked into more of the history because I didn't know some of the very beginning stuff. But it's actually really funny. The Kodocha Wiki, it started in 2009, which is
Mm.
great because obviously that means it's been around for a long time and it's had a lot of people able to work on it. But it's really funny because it does seem like it just keeps being passed like as a torch, where like one person works on it for a few years and then they did clearly what they wanted to do, and then another person comes a few years later and they work on it, and then they pass the torch to somebody else. And it seems like it's been a lot of that. But hopefully I'm in this for the long haul, even if sometimes I fall off the horse.
That's amazing. That it's been around for 15 years.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Dang.
Obviously,
And
though, it does seem like a lot of the information that's really important has only been on in recent years. So, for example, there was a user that put on, all the episodes and such in like 2016, 2017. So it might have been more bare bones before that, but.
gonna say because the list of episodes is I have that bookmarked. That's the page I go to most
Yeah.
often on the wikis because I can never remember. I'm like, I think that's episode whatever, and then I go look to make sure I'm like correct on the number.
Yep,
Yeah, no, when you
I
have
do that
102
too.
episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, when I got into the series, around that time, it was 2016, and there was a time when there was like barely any information on Kodocha on the internet. Like we really had like the Wikipedia page and then the fandom wiki, and then
Yeah.
like I never saw anything else. But I feel like over the last couple of years, like the information on the series has really been building on the wiki and in other places as well.
Which is obviously a good thing. I want
Absolutely.
this stuff to be accessible to everybody.
Me too.
Definitely. And like we also have to give credit to, people like RGM who've been putting together things for like the Kodocha archive and making sure
Absolutely.
that some of these items are available, in perpetuity because I don't know. I was talking with Hot Water and Milk on Tumblr
Mhm.
recently because she is kind of like the queen of all things wedding peach
Mhm.
on the internet. And she runs a fan site for wedding peach that's very comprehensive
Mhm.
and has basically like all of the information about like the soundtracks and the episodes and the mangas and the different releases. And it is such a cool resource. And I'm like, I would love to do something like that for Kodocha. I just don't know if I want to spend the money on it, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's always the downside, but I feel like as a community we can get something together at some point. Which is why
Yeah,
it's been
gotta
so
fund
fun
something.
engaging with like the Discord server and like you guys and seeing what everybody else is doing. But yeah, I hope that the wiki can be a good part in that ecosystem. I haven't been doing, unfortunately, like too much recently because I've just been a little busy, but my
Mm.
current project is trying to put like pages for all the manga chapters on because that's to me
Oh,
like a big blind side that it doesn't have right now.
I
Um,
would completely agree. Yes. And honestly, you don't, Ari and I have to say this to each other all the time. Like, these are things that we do for fun. Like, this is how we spend our free time. We are
yeah.
busy people with jobs. Like, you know, you don't owe anybody out there constant updates at all. The
Mhm.
fact that you are willing to hold the torch and be it's the Kodocha Wiki's guardian is enough. But thank
Oh,
you
well,
also
thank
for your
you.
labor.
Well, thank you. And thank you guys for doing everything that you do. I feel like we're all in this together and we will figure it out even when we're busy.
Thank you.
Exactly. We are all in it together. And one day we will get our manga reprint.
Yes, we
Uh
will. Thankfully, though, I feel like I've seen a lot of copies of obviously it's not the same, but I've seen a lot of copies of the Tokyo Pop just floating around recently.
yeah. One hit up
It's
on Mercari like this morning, all 10 for $250. And I was like, that's
I
not a
saw the
bad
same one.
price, actually. I
Yeah,
love
no,
it.
exactly. I actually just recently, I haven't had the entire manga. I still don't. I'm missing four and five. But
Ah.
I have like most of the series now, obviously, because before I only had like three volumes. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm very thankful.
I will keep an eye out for good pricings on 4 and 5
Oh, well,
then.
thank you. I'm
Um,
I'm keeping an eye out too, obviously having that we both saw the same Mercari.
That's funny
But
because 4 and 5 were actually the first copies I got, and I found them at a Comic-Con, and like my mind was blown
oh my
because
gosh, yeah, no,
I
I got my first issues at a convention also. I got
oh
one, two,
nice.
three. I think they also had like a random seven, but and this is no disrespect because I've come around to like this now, but for some reason at the time I didn't like seven's cover. So I
mm,
just was like, actually, I'm just gonna get one through three, and I regretted that decision for years.
oh,
Yeah, seven's the
so
only
true.
cover that doesn't feature Sana, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
it has just a keto with the like sunglasses and like a fur trimmed coat, and it just to me like at the time I was like a hater because I was like, it doesn't look like a keto's style, you know?
Hmm.
He doesn't dress like that typically, and like I've come around to be like, I actually appreciate his like drama fashion, you know?
I think that the cover of 7 is a dual page color spread
Yeah, it is. It has Sana,
from
I think, on the
Reborn.
back. I appreciate it now, but at the time I just was like, Akito does not dress like this. Why is he dressed like this?
Definitely a fair complaint. My first volume I found was volume 8, and I had never read any of the manga. And so I cracked it open in the middle of the Kazuyuki arc and
Oh
was
goodness.
Yeah, what a part to flip to.
truly, I was like, what's happening?
That's
Oh
so funny.
man. Oops. So anyway, that was before I went and found the scans and read it from the beginning because I was like, I got follow-up questions. Like,
Yeah.
should we get into the episode?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure.
Okay. My first thought is just from the top, the little recap of episode 17,
Hmm.
um, with the biking and the hug.
The hug.
And the look, the
And
expression, that panning up and seeing Akito looking so serious. I love
It's
it.
so drama the way that they play it out. They make it look like he's
Yeah,
gonna like protect her from bullets or something.
I know, I love it.
I do too. It's one of those things like when the anime adapts, they adapt so good. And this is definitely one of those scenes
Mhm.
where I was
Absolutely.
just like, oof, beautifully done, expertly
Yeah.
executed.
A lot of the I was really surprised when I was rewatching it like right after reading the manga where I was like, wow, a lot of the staging in this is like one to one.
Yeah.
Because it's not as if that doesn't happen, but it happens like I feel like more than usual, you know?
Yeah, the composition is very recognizable.
Yeah.
I agree. Top of the next episode, where we have, or top of episode 18, where you know that beautiful moment is broken by Akito being a silly, silly boy. Um, and what I noticed is when watching the dub, which surprised me, is that he calls her Karada instead of Sana.
Oh, I didn't even notice. I noticed something else in that scene, ironically, but I didn't notice that.
Oh, what else did you notice?
I noticed that in the English dub, he kind of so like obviously he mentions the bra thing, which is the beginning of a ongoing thing that he mentions. But in the Japanese version, he more like admittedly like after she yells at him, he's like, I was just trying to make it more lighthearted. But
Hmm
in the English dub, he's more like, I'm genuinely concerned about you. Like he's more like playing into the fact that he's confident about that still.
Hmm.
Which I feel like changes the way that that's perceived because it does feel like he's then like, oh, he was just trying to make her feel better. He did it in like a weird way, but
Hmm.
that was his attempt.
Yes, I agree. And I do think, I don't know, the English version of the dub, sometimes I'm like, yeah, okay, I can understand why we made that choice. A lot of the time, I'm just mystified. Um, oh, to be a fly on the wall in that room. Another interesting little dub thing from that scene is when she's like, get me something to drink. And and he goes like, would you like fries with that in the English version, which I thought was cute because in the Japanese version, in both the manga and the anime, he's like, I should give her noodle sauce instead. Um,
Yeah. It feels
which I
like a
thought was fun.
very 90s kid response. Um,
Oh yeah. Would you like fries with that? For sure.
yeah.
My notes
Yeah,
for
no,
this one
it's
are relatively chronological, but
mhm.
mostly fangirl gushing. I don't have a lot of things of substance to say about this
I
one.
feel like that's why it's one of my favorite episodes, though. It's just so like, oh my gosh, they're having a slumber party. There are emotions happening. Like,
Yeah, it's
It's
that's
the
really
why
the
it's so
dream.
fun.
first it's really the first really intense romantic moments between them. At least I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely feels very overtly romantic. Whereas
Yeah.
before, I think that there's like some sort of there could be other energies, happening there. Like I one of my notes I wrote down was like, I love that they keep meeting in the middle of the night.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think at the end of the Promise Summer arc, or beginning of the Promise Summer arc, they run into each other before they walk in on the teachers having their little
Yeah.
banquet. Um, but that felt different than this episode, if that makes sense,
Agree.
Yeah.
in terms of energy.
I felt like they were really in sync in this episode, where
Yeah.
Sana's more
Mm,
closed off during the Promised Summer episodes.
yes, definitely agree. And I thought that there was some really interesting kind of inadvertent foreshadowing to just sort of how Sana generally handles conflict, in
Hmm.
that she doesn't, and her preference is to leave, run, escape, pull back. And so I thought that was interesting that we're starting to see some of that taking shape in this episode.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and she's been doing it since she was little too, because there's a flashback, and honestly, it's one of my favorite flashbacks from the series when she's little. And Misako's talking about in her book how she's always, showing this happy face to the world, but she always has to go and hide when she feels the need to cry.
Exactly. I feel like that's why the my daughter and our I arc is really impactful, you know? Because for the entire series up until this arc, it's about, other characters. It's about Akito causing problems in class. It's about Akito's family. It's about Rei. It's about other characters. But then suddenly it's like, okay, Sana, it's time for you to have this, you know?
Hmm.
And I feel like it's fun to see Akito be that kind of protective role after having her help him a lot. And we've obviously already seen him, kind of affirm the fact that it's like, hey, I want to be there for you too in the Promised Summer. Um, but I feel like it's like this is the culmination of that has already been affirmed before, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so it's very drama, it's very fun.
I agree. And I don't know, something about the art in this episode too, like really feel like they were pulling out all the stops.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
The babies, I literally just, I'm like, I love you guys had this beautiful, lovely things to say about like, you know, the flashbacks and about Sana and my note for that section is just baby Sana with a heart next to it. Um,
No, she has such a cute little updo. She's so precious.
she's
Hmm.
adorable. I was like, oh no, must protect. Like,
The
I
way
love
that she's so
how,
accepting of Misako, like, and her crazy hairstyles and everything too. She's just like, this is normal and I like it.
yep.
yeah,
I love how she has that moment where like she's being picked on by the other girls because her mom is famous and she's so sweet and pure that she takes it as a compliment. I love that for
Yeah.
her.
I
What a
know.
sweetheart.
That's our baby. I love her.
Literally.
Do you guys have anything? I have an interesting note on the English version from
Ooh.
when Misako and Fuyuki are on the phone together.
Oh, go for it.
Nothing crazy other than just like, and I don't think the English edition meant to do this, but Misako says like I think in the Japanese version she says something to the effect of like, yeah, maybe it would be good for her to like stay with you guys for a couple of days, like it'd be good for her or something. And then the
Yeah.
English version she goes, it might help to put a smile on her face. And I
Oh.
had immediate volumes 9 and 10 like
Oh,
doll
yeah, that,
syndrome
wow.
panic like
I didn't even think of that angle. That's interesting.
but like why would the anime be foreshadowing that anyway? I think it was like purely coincidental, but it is where my brain went.
No, I think that's like, it's like 4D chess.
Yeah.
I like the concept that like the English dub people somehow knew, like maybe they were manga fans and they were like, we gotta.
The dream. The dream. Somehow I
Obviously,
don't feel
I
like that's
can't
what happened,
imagine.
but
Yeah, no, it's still just fun to think of though.
exactly.
That's a good note. I didn't notice that at all. I was gonna mention one change between the manga and the anime that I noticed that I feel like the implication is still there, but obviously we know that Sana can't sleep because she took a nap during the day. The anime even points that out and everything. Um
Hmm.
but the reason Akito can't sleep is kind of just implied. Um
Hmm.
but in the manga it's shown that when he can't sleep and he's in his room, he's reading My Daughter and I.
Mm.
Which to me feels like it's him still like processing the information and like thinking about what this means for Sana. Um, Meanwhile, in the anime, it's changed that it looks like he's reading a comic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I noticed that too, and I wasn't sure if it was Kodocha, like he was reading Kodocha and it was like an Easter egg. But it almost looked like the panel at the end of Volume 1 where his dad carries him away on his back and Sana's looking at him. It kind
Ooh.
of looked like that to me, but it was very ambiguous, so I couldn't make it out. But it looks like that panel from that last part of Volume 1.
Ooh, I'll
Hmm.
have to like double check it because I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I just was like, it is a comic. Um, but that would make sense given the anime is self-referential like that.
Hmm.
Definitely fair. Well, even the manga too, at some point. Like I think it's in volume 7, maybe 8, when Fuka is like, what happened between Sana and Akito? And Tsuyoshi is like, would you like to read these 4 volumes? Um,
Yeah, yeah, that I love those. That's so funny. It happens obviously to Ray also in the New York arc.
oh my gosh,
Anime.
yes. It's part of its charm, I think. I
It's so part of
appreciate
its
the
charm.
occasional, lifting of the curtain.
It always feels like it happens in a way too that's not so in your face where it's like this is the only thing we have to say. It's like doing something with that. Where it's like, okay, we want Fuka to be caught up with what happened. We are gonna
Hmm.
make a gag about this, you know? Um,
Yeah.
it's not just being like, hey guys, look, we're breaking the
Yeah.
fourth wall.
Yeah. There definitely always seems to be an intention behind it. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good note. I did think it was interesting too. I think I guess it's been a while since I read the manga chapter, but to me I was like, and the ramen interlude is something that happens in the manga and it doesn't. She just
It
goes over
doesn't.
there. But it was a cute addition and I liked it a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Their
it definitely
gross
feels,
taste.
yeah, it definitely feels like less. Obviously, I don't know how the culture is in Japan, but I definitely would not have been allowed to go to like a convenience store in the middle of the night.
Oh,
So the manga feels a little bit more realistic in the way that they're just, you know, they're just hanging out. Um,
yes.
but it
It
is like a
looks
fun interlude. I like that Sana, when she disguises herself in boys' clothes, she's wearing like not only is she wearing Akito's clothes, but she's wearing Akito's clothes that we've seen him wear before.
Oh man.
I
Remember
like
when
how
they like
much.
did different outfits?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Those
I
were the
do.
days.
I do like how that moment too was like Akito's teasing her and saying she looks like a boy because she's braless and everything.
Yeah. It's funny, silly. Like it's funny that the things that she's teased on get brought up like multiple times because the bra point is brought up like a few different times by Natsumi in the bath and then Akito then. And then the moles obviously get mentioned like multiple times and you think it's just an innocuous thing, but then it obviously becomes plot relevant in the next few
Hmm.
episodes.
That's what
Um
I love about Kodocha. It's like it always, even with the smallest things, it always seems to subvert your expectations.
so true.
Very true. The only other thing I'd add there is that the bath scene was also an anime only edition, which
It
I hadn't
was.
remembered. And like it's not uncommon to like bathe together. But I was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is an interesting ad. And that Sana would still be fixated on the bra point in
Yeah.
the anime.
It
Um,
it makes it feel more like Natsumi and Sana are like bonding in their own right.
yes, I agree. And I genuinely like I can't watch this episode without being just like hanging out with your future in-laws. Like
Yep.
Yeah, so true.
just
It's
fitting
fun
into
to
the
just,
family.
yeah, no, exactly. It's so fun to just see Akito's family like after they're more healthy, you know? It's like, wow, we're seeing Sana's impact.
And I love like I don't know, like Natsumi and Akito teasing each other and you know, like there's not that same sort of betrayal between them
Yeah.
anymore.
No,
Um
it's so refreshing.
it is. And also I love any episode that features Fuyuki for more than 5 minutes. So
Yeah, no, he's great.
I love it. He's so funny. On the note of Natsumi, while we are talking about her, something that I thought was interesting is in the English version. Obviously, we don't do anything with honorifics, which is fine. I have made my peace with it.
Yeah.
Um, but in the Japanese version, there's this kind of running gag through the anime and the manga where, it is culturally more normal to refer to your older sister as One-chan, One-san, like however, whichever honorific of your choice, but not to call them
Mhm.
by their first name, basically. And so
Yeah.
Akito, as a person who uses no honorifics for basically anybody over the course of the entire series, always calls her Natsumi. And so it's this sort of recurring, like, will you please just call me big sister? Like, will you please just call me big sister? Kind of thing that keeps coming up. And so this
Yeah.
comes up again in this episode. And in the English version, they translated that to call me Queen Natsumi, which I thought was interesting. It
Hmm.
Yeah,
was a choice.
I didn't even notice that one. Because
Ah,
I watched the dub first, and I've just like accepted that in my brain. But then when I watched the Japanese version, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I didn't really think too hard about that was the way that they chose to translate it. That's so interesting.
well, I had wondered if the reason was because she was telling, because sometimes in the manga she will say like "call me One-sama," which
Mhm.
is honorific for use of like lords, queens, royalty,
Yeah.
and it sort of can be used in jest sometimes. So I'd wondered if like perhaps that was what it was, call me One-sama.
Mhm.
And that's why they had made that particular translation choice. But no, she just wants a simple, just call me One-san.
Yeah.
Damn it. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
But
I
I thought
mean,
it was
I think
interesting.
that is the same scene where they're like showing his little baby photo. So maybe,
I think
um,
so.
yeah. So he maybe was doing it more purposely there. I'm sure he's just doing it because that's what he does, though.
Oh, for sure. I do think his propensity to not use any kind of honorific, and honestly, like he'll skip to first names too with people,
Mhm.
or nicknames, particularly in the manga, relatively quickly.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's not a polite speech boy.
He is not.
That's not his character.
Nope.
On the note of that evening trip to the convenience store, what is up with this Zenjiro subplot?
I don't know, but I love it when he comes out in a bikini and a goat head. It made my day for sure.
I do always love when he slips at the elevator and he's just like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." Like fully mask off.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's so I think the thing that gets me about that scene is I'm like, what are these reporters on that they're like, yep, he's gone. I can't see him.
I
Um
mean, I guess they did think that a giraffe was his girlfriend and falling off the roof. Um,
that's fair.
so I suppose
That's
it's consistent, but it still is, it's funny.
it's an unhinged scene.
It is. I always forget too what like started that entire arc because I know it's like an episode before,
I think
where they're
and
just
I
asking him for comment about my daughter and I, and he mentions something about something, but I always forget what it is.
I think he's like talking about like a date he had with somebody, and he's like, "No, no, we're not serious." Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's just funny though, because I
oh
always, when I think of this like little arc with him, I think of this scene, like with him in the goat head and the bikini, um, and going to Australia. Um, the dub is so funny when he mentions the Australia line. They really punched that line up to make it funny. And obviously it's funny in the Japanese one too, but they play up the fact that he's being like, "Don't run away from your problems. By the way, I'm going to Australia."
yeah. It's a beautifully done line read. It's excellent.
It is.
In terms of my next note, unless you guys have something else on that kind of chunk of episode,
I think I'm good.
Yeah, me
is
too.
kind of on the I just want to talk a little bit about like the kind of the Japanese behind the mother reveal yourself.
Oh, that'd be
Yeah.
great. That's
Um,
actually what I have next to my notes, but I don't have anything about the Japanese. But I made note of how in in the English version it's Mother Reveal Yourself, and in both the manga and Japanese it's Mother Come Forward.
it is interesting because like I paused the screen and I'm literally trying to read it.
Oh,
Like, and
yeah.
I don't have great Japanese reading skills, but I'm like, I'm getting better and it's with practice. But I was like, let me see if I can like try to pick out this messaging myself. It
Mhm.
is like a message within a message, basically. So when, she's like, if you look at the first character of each line and read right to left, you'll be able to read it. And I was like, that's not what anything says. What are you talking about? When in truth, like, so each kanji that starts off each chapter title, it's the first character of that kanji. So it's
Mm.
not like the first kanji, I think that's um now I'm looking at I took a picture of it on my phone. The first like kanji of it is the kanji haru, which is spring. And I'm
Mm.
like reading like and so I'm reading like the kanji right to left, like haru, like hama, onna, like going right to left. I'm like, that doesn't say that. What are they
Yeah.
talking about? But she's talking about how there are furigana over the kanji for each
Mhm.
of those going right to left, and you're just reading the first furigana going right to left. So it is an insanely convoluted message that it is like a true miracle that anybody would have gotten.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised that Keiko showed up then.
Literally, like it's so yeah, it's very subtle. I was like, so I'm looking at this like that doesn't I don't understand what she's saying, but it's because you're only looking at the first chunk of each kanji, and you're not looking at the kanji holistically. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that is really
Um,
interesting. I always like figured that I was like, did Keiko even notice that, or did she just, hear the story and was like, "Oh, that's the time frame. That's the place that like this makes sense."
mm,
Um, because I feel like it's just, or at least to me, it's like that is so obscure. I wonder if she did notice.
yeah, I I don't know. I mean, but it does to me lend an interesting thought because I guess like previously I always had assumed that like she had gotten the message, but I'd never stopped to look at the text before to
Yeah.
see. how easy that was to pull out. And the answer is not easy at all. So
Yeah, it's very drama in the episode though in a fun way because it obviously is confirming some of Sana's fears about the book. And she's able to obviously show that more to Akito and be like, see, look, there's something that's confirming what I'm scared of. Um, and I love the scene obviously of Akito affirming like, well, I'll tell him like that you can't go. Like that's so good. The line read there is really good.
I agree. That was definitely like in one of Jerry Jules, I think one of my favorite Akito line reads.
It's really good. I was also really impressed with the Japanese version also because I don't know if you guys have mentioned this, but the voice actor for Akito in the Japanese version was only like 14 when the show
I
started.
didn't know
Uh,
that.
yeah, he was like young. Um, so and he does a good job, I think.
Yeah, he
Uh,
does. That's really interesting. I honestly was thinking it was like I mean, it sounds like a young guy, but I
yeah.
didn't think it was a teenager.
At least
Yeah.
like when I checked, I might get these years wrong, but I think he was literally born like 82 and this was obviously coming out in 96.
Dang.
Um, so he was young.
Yeah, that is interesting, especially because Sana's Japanese voice actress, Shizue Oda, I want to say
Mhm.
is her name.
That sounds
She
right.
was a like a radio personality.
Yeah, no, she
Um,
was in her 30s. She was more established.
yeah, slaying the game too for her.
Yeah,
I think her
genuinely.
debut voice acting.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. A lot of the voice actors in Kodocha, it always surprises me, specifically in the Japanese version. Like when you go on their page to look at what else they did, it's always like, oh, they did two other things.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. There's not like sometimes I'll be watching. I'm always proud of myself if I'm watching something subtitled and I can like pick out a voice of somebody that I've heard before.
Yeah, so true.
For some reason, that feels like more of a skill in Japanese than it does in English.
Well, I think it's because then you're making the connection because of the sounds, not because that you understand like the intonation and everything. Obviously, you can
Yeah,
also do that, but I understand what you're saying.
yeah. It feels more like yeah. This is not my native language. Like the differences are not as obvious to my ear.
Exactly.
Um, I'm always so, but there's so much overlap. I'll be like, oh, hello, I've seen you in three things. Um, like or four
Yeah.
things or it's just interesting but
No,
in
it's
any
so
case
interesting. I thought it was really funny when I watched the OVA, and it's obviously Megumi Ogata as Akito, who's
the
like
queen of my
she,
heart.
yeah, no, she's so cool. And so it's like, wow, you were Akito once? That's so cool.
Literally like it's I still haven't watched the OVA, which is shocking because I'm actually a Megumi Ogata super fan.
Oh my God, I'm like holding your hand on this. I love her too.
Oh my god, like just she has voiced every Bishonen I've ever loved.
No, you're so right.
Like and I just adore her. So I'm always happy when I hear her in something too.
Oh yeah, no,
It's
she always
always
kills it.
exciting.
I like when I watched Tokyo
No.
Mew Mew, she like brought me through that
Yes.
show.
Oh my God, yes. I love her as Ayama so
She
much.
kills it there. She is so good.
She is, I was so sad that they didn't bring her back for the reboot,
Oh
TBH.
my gosh, did they not? I haven't watched the reboot at all.
They didn't, but they did cast Japanese Kyo
Mm,
as Ayama.
that's
So that,
interesting.
which worked out well. It was fine.
There's like a
There's our
triangle you
obligatory
could make
fruits
there.
basket.
Yeah, there's like a triangle you could make there of like the dub voices of Kodocha and Fruits Basket, and then the Megumi Ogata as being like Akito once and this, and like you could make the most convoluted like Pepe Sylvia board of that.
Oh, absolutely. It's like you know how I don't know if anybody's talked about the bacon number in like 15 years. Do people still know what that means?
I think I know what that means.
I don't
So
think
yeah,
so.
your bacon number it's for actors, and your bacon number is what your degrees of separation between you and Kevin Bacon are because he's
Yeah.
been in so many
Oh
movies.
yeah, I've heard of that.
Yes,
It's
I
been a
feel like
while.
the anime flip side of that is like, what is your like Ogata number?
Yeah, that's so true.
Like where is your connection with Megumi Ogata? Because you definitely have one, especially if you've worked in shoujo.
Oh, 100%. She's in everything. I feel
Yes.
like even most people, if they haven't watched too many shows, it's like, okay, well, have you watched Neon Genesis Evangelion? Because then you have something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I thought the OVA was very interesting when I was like, oh, she's here? Oh.
I'm like, to me, I'm like, imagine being Obana and like, an OVA is being made of your series. Very exciting on its own. Not
Yeah,
only that, but Megumi Ogata is coming in to play your lead. Like,
that would be crazy.
like, I'm sad. Like, just
No, genuinely. She mentions in her author's note, obviously, where she's like, I didn't get to go to the taping, but I was working on it as as I knew it was happening, and I was like, wow, they're coming to life right now. Which I think is such a cute author's note. It's like, yeah, that would be what I think an author would feel in that moment.
yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting to see like which series get adaptations, which don't. Cause like in like the Oran High School Host Club notes, and I'm blanking on her name out. Oh, Bisco. Hattori Bisco. Um, she talks about like they did radio, like audio CDs, like long
Yeah.
before they announced the anime. And she
Hmm.
was just pumped that they were doing that. So a
Wow,
full anime adaptation, very exciting stuff.
for sure.
Anyway, I feel like we circled way off topic there, but
No, that's okay. I think it was still interesting.
okay,
Yeah, that
good.
was really interesting because like I didn't know any of that other than the bacon number thing.
I've never heard of it in that specific term, but it makes sense to me. That's why I was like, I don't know if because I obviously know Separation from Kevin Bacon a little bit before my time, but I still remember people talking about it. But yeah, that's interesting.
It was like a game my friends and I used to play. We would try to come up with an actor and we would like see if we could get a bacon number of like 4 or higher, or be like, there's no way these two have been in anything together. And then like he's just been in so many things that it was actually very challenging to do.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So if you need a way to kill time, there you go.
I'll keep it in mind.
In any case, where were we?
We just talked about well, we got off track because I mentioned the voice actor for Kido is 14 or was
Oh,
around
that's right.
14, and he did a really good job with the line read of the drama culmination of telling Sana that, she's not gonna have to go anywhere because he'll tell him. Oh, and then obviously Naozumi has his moment of covering for Sana.
Yes, I'll protect her in my own way.
Yeah, it's
I
it's
love
so
that.
cute.
It really is. It is so fun too because like I guess comparatively speaking, like they haven't known each other that long, but like he's
Yeah.
already kind of like, just has made a kind of decision about what he wants their relationship to be.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that Akito, in his like infinite wisdom, like immediately can tell that Sana has started like feeling guilty about it and is like, don't do that. He did that of his own volition. Like
Which is
Mhm.
so
his
like
actions are not your
it's
problem.
showing his like emotional intelligence about Sana specifically, which is really
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really nice detail, actually. Yeah, I honestly, Nazumi's one of the like rival and love characters I feel like I really can get behind. Like I'm definitely a Sana and Akito shipper for sure. Like I think they
Mhm.
work well together and they're meant to be together, but like Naozumi from like I feel like I never had a moment where I disliked Naozumi. Like I always thought that he was such a green flag, honestly. Like he was always looking out for her
Mhm.
from the beginning. And like I feel like there's like, people can hate characters and whatnot, but like I can't find a reason to dislike him at all.
No, that makes a total sense because I feel like he's never vindictive about things. He's always just like, I want the best for Sana. If that's me, then cool. If that's not, I still want her to be happy.
Hmm.
He's a very good boy.
He
I was
is.
not mature enough to know that until much later in my life. When I was like 12, all of my Kodocha fanfics, I was like, who are the villains? Fuka and Naozumi. Um, Now they are two of my favorite characters, but at the time, I was like, ooh, villain team up, Team Rocket style,
I
Fuka
still
and
I
Naozumi.
I feel like I can still like I love them, but I can also get why your inclination at the time would be that. Because I feel like the anime really introduces the fact that like I feel like Tsuyoshi is more of a character in the anime. Like I'm not saying that he's not a character in the manga, but he feels more like a main character for longer in the
Mhm.
anime. And so I feel like when Naozumi and Fuka do kind of come into the picture, it does almost feel like something's being like changed that didn't need to. Um,
Hmm.
at least when you're like a certain age. So I can see why when you were that age, you'd be like, okay, villain, yeah.
Yeah, for it's like anybody getting in the way of my ship at all. Like,
It's funny,
forget it.
even as an adult, when I first watched Kodocha, because I was in my early 20s,
Mhm.
I I always liked Naozumi, but oh my gosh, I couldn't stand Fuka when I first watched the series. But she's definitely, I feel like every time I rewatch or reread her sections in particular, like she grows on me even more each time.
Yeah, she's like gonna like I'm not trying to say that she's unlikable in any way, but I do feel like again, she's like coming in so late into the series. There's already the characters have been through so much, so you're just kind of like, wait, she's acting like she's like in the group. She just got here. Um,
Hmm.
but I feel like when you like get used to that, you're like, okay, actually she rules.
Yeah, exactly. Like it feels very jarring because like
Mhm.
the drama with her really kicks off like that first episode when she comes in the first chapter. It's like slapping a keto and like you did this to me, you ruined my life, and it's like okay.
Yeah, it's like, girl, you just showed up.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
fair.
yeah, I feel like I had something else to say, but I'm forgetting what it was right now. I think it was just gonna be, oh, this was it. I remember when I was younger and I saw Naozumi, I was kind of confused at what his role was gonna be because I was like, the relationship with Sana and Akito felt so like locked in already that it didn't
Hmm.
feel like there needed to be like like a rival character. So I remember
Hmm.
thinking when I very first, as a 12-year-old, watched this episode, I was like, is the implication gonna be that they're related? Um, because obviously he
You
mentions
and
like that he's
Ari.
at the Kimura Academy. So I remember being like, is that where they're taking him? And I was kind of confused.
I love that you guys both had that similar impulse. Um, because Ari, you've said, right, that like when you first met Naozumi, you thought that the secret was going to be that like he was her brother, right?
Yeah. That was one of my
Mm.
theories. Like I wasn't sure like for sure like oh yeah, this is going to be the big secret, but it was like one of the
Huh.
things rolling around in my head.
Yeah.
I
So
wish
we
I
were
could
we were shaking
remember,
hands
but
on
I don't
that.
think I got sibling. I didn't pick up. That wasn't what I was gleaning at the time. I think just because Naozumi looks so different.
Which like I think
Um,
it does obviously I think that's supposed to be the intention is that you don't necessarily think that because he is supposed to be a rival character. But I don't know. I think I was just so on board for Sana and Akito getting together that I was like, we don't even need a conflict with their relationship. It's already here.
there. I was just like, Sana and Akito are doing all of that work themselves. They do not need
Exactly.
any help.
Exactly.
Bless their sweet angel baby faces.
Oh
Um,
wait,
only
sorry.
the
One more note on Naozumi. I was gonna say this is the first time we see him with his trumpet.
Oh
It
yeah.
is. And what a beautiful little scene too. I love that they have Maeda saying like, I'm trying to pass you off for a Bishonen. Like, why are you being so weird?
It is really funny. I
So
always
good.
love the little like last putter of the trumpet. It's so
Oh
cute.
yeah.
Something I will say about Naozumi that I picked up on in the dub this time around is we've had like Ari, sometimes you'll slip into it, and we've had several guests on the show that when they refer to Naozumi, they pronounce it like Natzumi. And it always throws me for a sec because I hear Natsumi, like
Hmm.
Akito's
Mhm.
sister. And I've been wondering, I guess I'd always kind of been like, where did that come from? Like, why is everybody pronouncing it that way? Am I wrong? And it was listening to the dub this time around that I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's what
no.
happened. That's why everybody's pronouncing it Natzumi for some reason.
Yeah.
I always
Um,
found it odd because I picked up on that too. It's not something I really consciously thought of a lot, but like I was, thinking of that and then like, but there's already a Natsumi. His name is Nao, like, and it's confusing.
I
Yeah,
also feel this way.
yeah. It feels like the dub team didn't know how to do the AO names because obviously they also have Tsuyoshi's sister, who in the dub they pronounce it Aono, which I think it
Mhm.
would actually be Aono, wouldn't it?
I'd need to hear it.
I need to hear it again too, but
But
I'm like,
there's not a lot of A sounds in Japanese, so
yeah, it's
I
always
think
a
your
ah.
impulse is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, all no. Yeah. Yeah, it would be.
They always say
And
Aono.
yeah,
Which
it
like
sure.
it does sound more like an Americanized name when you say it like that. So I'm kind of like, okay, like if that was their goal, then sure. In the same way
It
that like I know that you guys say Akito, and I'm always like the dub has poisoned me. I always call him Akito.
I still
Uh,
call him Akito, so don't
I
feel
was like,
bad.
it's me. I'm the person who's still saying Akito. It's me.
no,
I'm
no,
the
you're
only
right though.
person in this
You're
whole
correct.
freaking
It's just
show.
like my
Every
brain has been
guest we've
poisoned by the
had.
dub.
Well, and that's the thing is like I had a couple of the DVDs, but I watched the bulk of the series in Japanese my first time around. So
Mm.
that's where I began. That's where my context began. So I always pronounce them a bit more Japanese in that way.
Yeah, no, that makes
But
sense.
yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say that like I'm right and everybody else is wrong, but I'm also not saying that. So,
To me, your tone implies otherwise, but it's all right.
whatever gave you that idea? No, I
Well, it's all
kid.
good.
But I do feel like at that time specifically, like now I feel like a lot of the Funimation dubs and dubs more generally are, kind of just like leaning into the fact that some words you kind of end up saying with the Japanese accent and it is what it is, some names even.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but man, at the time, it's like they would do anything rather than like say anything vaguely accented, it felt like. So
Yeah, it also, I think it almost exaggerates it because that a lot of the names in Kodocha, such as like Sana and Rei, are also names that make sense in English contexts. Like I know I had a friend growing up named Sana, so when I saw Sana as a character, I was like, oh yeah, like my friend I know in real life in America. Um,
you had a friend named Sana. I've never
That's
heard that. I've heard
cool.
like I've known people named Ray, but I've never known anybody named Sana. That's interesting.
oh really? I had a friend named Sana that lived like two doors down.
Wow.
And I remember going over to her house and watching SpongeBob. So like, like me as a kid watching Kodocha, I was like, oh yeah, Asana, like my friend. Um,
I love
I
that.
think she
Cool.
had moved away at that point. Otherwise, I probably would have been like, look.
Dang.
But obviously, like Ray is a common name. Um,
Hmm.
Not super common, but it's still an Americanized quote unquote name. Um,
Yes.
so I think it almost exaggerates things because then suddenly when you have a character named something like Akito, it's like, okay, well that's not that. That's so fun. I'm like still I'm thinking I'm like, wow, really? Sana isn't like in my brain it's always just been like an American name, but I think it's literally because I just had a neighbor named that.
I love that. Ah, Zangetsu Nanako.
Mhm.
Okay. I have like a couple of notes from the manga, but
Yeah, same here, if you want me
yeah, yeah, what you
to.
got?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, there's actually a scene in the manga that's not in the anime, and it's Rei. He goes to pick up Keiko from the phone booth,
Hmm.
and
Oh, I have a note on that too. You can continue though.
I didn't really have much. I thought it was an interesting scene, and I kind of like there's a fourth wall break there where he's like not wearing his sunglasses, and he's like didn't recognize me, huh?
Yeah, no, that's so fun. What I thought was really interesting is that it feels like they didn't have that scene because they wanted to build up the drama of meeting Keiko more. Because like what
Hmm.
we just see is that, they get a call and it's like, oh, it's a young lady. We don't know that she's calling about that. We just know it's a young lady. And then we obviously see like Akito at school and Sana getting the call from Ray. And we don't hear what the call was about until Akito gets home and, Sana tells him. And that really drives that like drama cliffhanger moment.
I would agree with that. My only note though is that I really love the way like the tension is a bit tighter, I feel like in the manga. Like the
It
drama
is.
builds and kind of progresses in the anime episode. But
Mhm.
like, Rei apologizes to Misako. Like the phone rings, Shimura's like, somebody's on the phone that says that it's the mother. And Misako's like, it's too soon. Like, how is this possible? She
She like
drops her
break
tea. Like,
Yeah, she
yeah,
breaks her
like
glass. It's so drama.
that that like hand shaking, like kind of very nervous tension. We lose that in the anime, I think. But they
That
do a
is
nice job
true.
of building up to that cliffhanger.
Yeah, I
So
feel like
they're
it's
different.
yeah, it's valuing different things because I feel like with
Mm,
the anime it is more being like, okay, we got to get to that killer cliffhanger, and then in the manga it's more about like, and obviously the mediums are different because like
mm.
something else I was thinking about on the medium shift is like the scene where Akito, really affirms like, hey Sana, like I'm gonna fight for you on this. Obviously he doesn't say it like that, but that's just it's not that the scene doesn't feel impactful in the manga, but I feel like when you're actually hearing it out loud, it sits with you different. Um,
Mm.
and I feel like similarly in the manga, because that I feel like cliffhangers don't exist in the same capacity. Like obviously, if you were reading this as it was being, published in Reborn or whatever, you'd have to wait. Um,
A
but
month. A month.
a month,
Everybody
yeah.
needs to think about that every time we complain about stuff. Our suffering could be so much worse.
No,
True.
literally. But like they definitely had the cliffhanger of it, but it's like a different kind of cliffhanger than what a show is gonna have. So I do feel like the tension is different and it really plays into each medium. That's a really good point, though.
And on that note, something that a panel that I just really tugged at my little heartstrings was like the from the end of the chapter where Sana's starting to kind of spiral and freak
Mhm.
out and be like, let's just go somewhere. I don't care where, we just gotta go. And Akito slaps her and he's like, you can't run away from this. That like you can't run away from this look in the manga is like so like soft.
Yeah, it's so tender.
Yes. Yeah, like, yes, like he has struck her to get her to shut up, but also
Which,
like it wasn't,
Aikido moment.
yeah, for real. But like, but the look in his eyes is so much less, is like, it's not demanding or anything. It's just like, you can't run away from this. And I don't know, it
Yeah,
just, it's a really good one.
it
Mhm.
really is.
Anytime they lock eyes in the manga, I'm like, I'm dying. I'm dead.
Yeah.
I'm
Same.
gone. Ugh, that's a good one. It's a really good chapter and episode.
It is. I love all the art from it. I did want to mention, let me actually make sure that I got the guy's name right, but I was gonna say the director and storyboard artist of this episode was Hiroaki Sakurai, who did a lot of other episodes on Kodocha also. Um,
Hmm.
let me double check to make sure.
This does feel like my next like level of Kodocha hyperfixation. Like is
It's
gonna be like which was the lead, who was the lead storyboard on each episode because then I can
speaking of
figure out
things
which
that
ones I
I'd like
really
to
like.
do
It
on
goes
the
really
wiki.
deep.
Yeah, no, speaking of things I'd like to do on the wiki, I'd like to have pages for like all the storyboard director and stuff, but obviously
Um, I
that's in the
found
future.
a page on the Internet Archive that might be useful to you. I'd have to dig,
Ooh.
but if I find it, I'll send it to you.
Oh, thank you. I would appreciate that. But yeah, thankfully Japanese Wikipedia has like all of the directors and storyboard artists, but
Hmm.
any additional information is very useful. But I was gonna say he also worked on episodes like the second episode, the ninth episode, um, obviously this one. He also did the second Christmas episode in the
Hmm.
anime, which is another favorite of mine. He's also worked on shows like Revolutionary Girl Utena, just a lot of different things. He was like the director on the Parappa the Rapper
Oh,
anime.
wow. An illustrious career.
Yeah.
I
He
haven't
did a
heard the
great
words
job on this
Parappa the
episode though.
Rappa in years.
Yeah.
Like maybe 20 years. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
He he was the director though. He did a lot of different stuff. Obviously, I'm not exhaustively going over his career, but he did a great job directing and storyboarding this episode. And I think it is interesting. He also did like in the second season he did Sing It Once Again, 3, 2, 1. Which
Okay.
as much as that's kind of like a nonsense episode, I think the artwork on that is really good. Um, so yeah. I thought
Huh.
I was just I wanted to mention him real quick because the art is very good on this episode.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love knowing this because all of the episodes that you mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, I did like the art for that episode particularly.
Yeah, it's cool to find that kind of stuff. And he worked on a lot of the early part of the show because again, he did like episode 2 and like episode 9, also episode 5. Um,
Mhm.
but then he kind of seems to drop off and then he comes back in like the 60 episodes. So
Mhm.
perhaps he did something in between there, but in any case, yeah. I think that the
That's
artwork in the manga is great, and then it's translated so well in the anime. And it is funny to see the scenes that are like one for one. Like the
mhm.
Naozumi interview on the television is like the exact same posing.
Oh yes, and even like his face when Maeda comes and finds him.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it. That is interesting though, because I think so. Just some general TV lore, like your first like two or three, because TV shows are typically directed by different individuals each week.
Yes.
And whoever your first like three or four directors are on a show are really going to be establishing like the look and the feel of that show.
Yeah.
So they're typically chosen with like a lot of care.
Hmm.
And so I find that really interesting that like, his role in episode 2 like did contribute to the look and the feel of the show.
Absolutely.
So
And
just
he's like still working nowadays. He literally has a credit from 2024 already.
good for
Um,
him.
yeah, honestly.
Booked and blessed.
Genuinely.
Do we have anything else we want or need to add?
Well, I don't have anything else to say except I think this episode and this chapter are amazing from start to finish.
Agree.
Solid agree. Iconic and very good for the soul.
Oh,
It is.
absolutely.
Ari and I were both commenting on how like it's been sometimes it just gets very like life and the everything and our own kind of punishing production schedules that we do to ourselves can be really tiring. And so it was really nice just to get to like sit and just absorb and enjoy.
Oh yeah, no,
Um,
I remember when I
you
was
know?
younger, and obviously I had already watched Kodocha. I would like the episodes that I would rewatch was always this one and then The Promised Summer.
Mm,
Because they just felt like kind of cozy, cathartic episodes.
yes. You're just right about that. They are. They're so good. I'm so glad that we had you here to talk about this stuff. This was super fun.
Yeah,
Hmm.
thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Of course. Um, I don't think that there's any housekeeping or anything we need to add other than, oh, hello, folks. That Kodocha Girl and I are taking a 1 month little break. So we will see you back in May for our next episode. But Holla, in the meantime, will still be online. Okay.
Woo!
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to 19 O'Clock News, a Kodocha podcast.
19 O'Clock News is hosted by That Kodocha Girl and Mahou Shoujo M.
We love making new friends. Feel free to join us in the Kodocha Discord under Kodocha_media.
19 O'Clock News is not affiliated with any current or previous rights holders to Kodomo no Omocha by Miho Obana.